database, but actual gold, heavy bars, ridiculous coins, enough wealth to buy a quiet moon where no one shouted orders before breakfast. After 12 years of war, 3 destroyed battleships, and 1 heroic charge he still claimed had been mostly accidental, he felt this was reasonable. So when he stood beneath the crystal dome of the Galactic Victory Hall, with 1,000 alien delegates staring down from floating balconies, Ethan kept his expression noble and his thoughts extremely practical. He was already deciding whether his future moon should have oceans or a small tavern that served fried potatoes, preferably both. The High Chancellor raised all 4 of his silver arms, and the hall fell silent. Behind Ethan, banners of conquered war fleets shimmered as holograms. Above him, the stars themselves were projected across the ceiling, turning slowly, like the galaxy had decided to attend the ceremony personally. Ethan straightened his uniform, which still smelled faintly of engine smoke despite 3 cleanings and 1 aggressive alien perfume device that had attacked him in the dressing room. "Human Commander Ethan Carter," the Chancellor declared, his voice amplified through the chamber. "For courage beyond measure, for ending the siege of Valor, and for saving 17 allied worlds from annihilation, the Council grants you the highest reward permitted by ancient law." Ethan's heart lifted. Highest reward sounded excellent. Highest reward sounded expensive. Then the floor opened. A circular platform rose from beneath the hall, surrounded by pale blue mist. At its center stood a woman in a white ceremonial cloak threaded with luminous circuitry. At first glance, she looked human, almost impossibly so, with graceful features, calm silver eyes, and long, platinum hair braided over one shoulder. But her ears were long and elegant, tapering upward through her hair like moonlit blades. She stood motionless, proud, and yet there was a guarded stillness in her face, as if she had learned long ago not to expect kindness from crowds. Ethan blinked. The Chancellor placed one hand over his chest. "By the Treaty of the First Stars, she is now under your guardianship." For 3 seconds, Ethan heard nothing but the soft hum of anti-gravity engines. Then he leaned toward the nearest translator drone and whispered, "Sorry, mine may be broken. It sounded like you said my reward is a person." The drone replied cheerfully, "Translation confirmed." "That is worse." A ripple of scandalized gasps traveled through the hall. The alien woman's silver eyes shifted toward him. To Ethan's surprise, the corner of her mouth twitched, almost forming a smile. The Chancellor continued, as if Ethan had not just insulted 7,000 years of sacred tradition. "This is Lyra of the Aurelian bloodline, last recognized heir of a people nearly erased from history. Her protection is an honor beyond treasure." Ethan slowly raised one hand. "Respectfully, I was told there would be treasure." More gasps. Somewhere above, a diplomat fainted so dramatically that his floating chair spun in a circle. Lyra finally spoke, her voice quiet but sharp. "Do humans always bargain during sacred ceremonies? Only when sacred ceremonies steal our retirement plans." This time she did smile, briefly, and the expression changed her entire face. Not softer exactly, but less distant, like a sealed door had opened by the width of a breath. The Chancellor's eyes hardened. "Commander Carter, the law has chosen you." Ethan looked from the Council to Lyra, then to the armed guards standing far too close to the platform. Their hands rested on weapons, but their eyes were not fixed on him. They were fixed on her. Fear, suspicion, hunger. He had seen those looks on battlefields before, usually seconds before someone made a terrible decision. His humor faded. Lyra noticed the change. Her chin lifted, as if she expected him to step away like everyone else eventually did. Ethan exhaled. "Fine," he said. "But if anyone asks, I'm still filing a complaint about the gold." A faint laugh escaped her before she could stop it. High above the ceremony, hidden behind the mirrored glass of an observation balcony, 3 shadowed figures watched in silence. One of them touched a black communication ring and whispered, "The human accepted her. Begin retrieval preparations." Below, Ethan had no idea that his reward had just made him the most hunted man in the galaxy. The transport ship assigned to Ethan looked less like a military vessel and more like something the Alliance had forgotten in a storage bay, and then politely pretended was still respectable. Its hull was scratched, its engines coughed before ignition, and the onboard artificial intelligence introduced itself as probably functional. Ethan stood in the narrow boarding corridor, staring at the ship with the expression of a man who had survived orbital bombardments only to be defeated by budget travel. Lyra stepped beside him, her white cloak folded over one arm, her long ears catching the pale light from the docking bay. "Is this your famous human courage?" "No," Ethan said. "This is my famous human concern for dying inside a flying kettle." The ship's speaker crackled. Passenger insult recorded. Emotional damage minimal. Lyra looked at the ceiling. "It talks?" "Unfortunately, yes. I prefer it already." Ethan gave her a wounded glance, but she walked past him with that calm, royal posture that made the mechanics nearby stop working just to stare. Some looked curious, others looked afraid. Lyra noticed all of it and pretended she did not, though her fingers tightened slightly around the cloak. Ethan caught the movement, small as a flicker in a reactor core, and said nothing. Inside, the cabins were barely large enough for one person, which became a problem when the ship cheerfully announced that ancient guardianship law required Ethan and Lyra to remain within 12 meters of each other until formal transfer was complete. Ethan stared at the glowing legal display. "That cannot be healthy." Lyra sat on the edge of the lower bunk. "For whom?" "For democracy." The AI chimed. "Democracy not found in current passenger contract. See, this is how tyranny begins, with bunk beds." For the first hour after departure, neither of them spoke much. The stars stretched into blue-white lines beyond the viewport as the ship entered hyperspace. Ethan cleaned an old plasma burn from his jacket. Lyra watched the shifting light, her silver eyes reflecting impossible distances. She seemed too still, as if silence were armor she had worn for years. Finally, Ethan said, "So, last recognized heir of a lost people. Is that as exhausting as it sounds?" She did not turn. "More. Good. I was worried the title was overselling it." Her lips moved, almost a smile. "And you? Human war hero. Is that as dramatic as the ceremony made it seem?" "Less dramatic. More mud. More screaming. A lot more bad soup." "Soup? Military soup. The enemy violated treaties, but our cooks violated physics." Lyra laughed softly, then seemed surprised by the sound. Ethan pretended not to notice because he had learned that some people protected their dignity the way soldiers protected airlocks. The moment ended when the ship lurched violently. Red warning lights flooded the cabin. Ethan was on his feet before the alarm finished its first cry. "Hyperspace disruption," the AI announced. "Unauthorized vessels approaching, probably hostile, possibly rude." "Define approaching," Ethan snapped. The viewport flashed. 3 black needle-shaped ships tore out of warped light, their engines burning violet. They moved with military precision, surrounding the transport before it could fully drop from hyperspace. Lyra rose slowly. The air around her shimmered. Ethan saw it clearly, thin threads of pale energy crawling over her hands, bright and delicate like lightning trapped under glass. "What is that?" he asked. "Nothing. That is the least convincing nothing I've ever seen." A blast struck the rear shield, throwing them both against the wall. Ethan caught Lyra before she fell, and for one strange second, her silver eyes widened at the simple reflex, as if she had not expected anyone to reach for her without calculation. The AI shouted, "Good news! Shields! Holding! Bad news! I lied!" Another impact rocked the ship. Ethan dragged Lyra toward the cockpit. "Can you fly this thing?" "No." "Can you shoot?" "No." "Can you do whatever that glowing hand trick is?" Lyra hesitated. "Not safely." "Excellent. We're building a strong team." They reached the cockpit as a boarding clamp slammed into the hull. Metal screamed. Ethan grabbed an emergency rifle from beneath the control panel and checked its charge, half full. Of course. Heroes never got full batteries. Lyra stood behind him, the glow around her hands growing brighter despite her effort to hide it. Outside the cockpit glass, masked figures crawled across the hull like insects, cutting through the airlock. Ethan glanced back at her. "Just to be clear, these are not friends of yours?" "No one chasing me has ever been a friend. That's a lonely policy. That's survival." The airlock exploded inward. Smoke filled the corridor. Shapes moved inside it. Ethan raised the rifle, but before he fired, Lyra whispered a word in a language that made the lights dim. A pulse of silver energy swept through the ship. Every console flickered. The attackers froze mid-step as gravity twisted around them, pinning them gently but humiliatingly to the ceiling. Ethan stared upward. One assassin dangled upside down, trying to look threatening and failing. Lyra swayed, pale but standing. Ethan lowered the rifle. "Not safely," she says. She breathed hard. "They are alive." Yes, but emotionally? Hard to say. For the first time since the ceremony, Lyra looked at him without distance. Fear remained there, but something else had entered too. Trust, small and uncertain. Then the captured assassin's mask cracked open, revealing a metal speaker instead of a mouth. A voice whispered through it, cold and distant. "Deliver the Aurelian heir, human, or every world that honors you will burn." Ethan's face hardened. The old soldier inside him, the one buried beneath jokes and exhaustion, woke completely. He stepped between Lyra and the message. "Tell your employer," he said. "I already lost my gold today. I'm in a very bad mood." The speaker went silent. Behind him, Lyra whispered, "You should have surrendered me." Ethan looked at the ruined airlock, the smoking walls, the assassins stuck to the ceiling, and the impossible stars waiting beyond the glass. "Probably," he said. But then who would complain about the ship? The damaged transport limped out of hyperspace above a dead planet wrapped in rings of broken satellites. The AI called it Ver 9, then added that landing there was statistically foolish but emotionally adventurous. Ethan told it to stop trying to make doom sound like tourism. Below them, ancient ruins glittered through violet clouds, half buried beneath glass deserts where old wars had melted the sand into frozen waves. Lyra stood behind the pilot's seat, one hand pressed to the console, her long ears angled slightly, as if she could hear something beneath the planet's silence. "There is a signal," she whispered. "It is calling my blood." Ethan glanced at the smoking engine display. "Great. My rewards now include haunted planets." The ship dropped hard through the atmosphere, rattling so violently that one ceiling panel fell into Ethan's lap. The AI apologized and asked whether he wanted to file a complaint. "I've started a list," Ethan muttered. They crashed beside a field of black stone towers, each carved with symbols that shifted when watched directly. Lyra stepped onto the glass sand and froze. The ruins reflected in her silver eyes, and for the first time since Ethan had met her, she looked less like a guarded stranger and more like someone returning to a home she had never been allowed to remember. Inside the central tower, walls awakened with pale light at her approach. Holograms unfolded around them, tall figures with long ears, graceful faces, and silver eyes like hers. Their voices came as music, then translated through Ethan's wrist device. "Aurelian seed bearer recognized. Gate lineage confirmed." Ethan raised a hand. "Before anyone confirms anything else, does this ruin have a snack area?" Lyra shot him a look, but her lips trembled with restrained laughter. The chamber answered by opening a stone pedestal, revealing a crystal sphere filled with spinning stars. When Lyra touched it, the entire tower shook. Images flooded the air, fleets burning, children hidden in stasis pods, Aurelians sealing away a cosmic machine called the Astral Gate. Ethan saw Lyra as an infant, asleep in a chamber of blue light, while her people whispered that one day she would either save the galaxy or become the key to enslaving it. Lyra pulled her hand back as if burned. "I was made for this," she said. Her voice was small, stripped of all sharpness. Ethan wanted to joke, but the words died before reaching his tongue. Outside, engines screamed overhead. Black ships pierced the clouds, and soldiers descended on anti-gravity lines, their armor dark as space between stars. Ethan pushed Lyra behind a cracked pillar. "How many people know about your family's charming little destiny?" "Apparently everyone except me." "That seems rude." The soldiers entered firing. Ethan moved before fear could settle, dragging Lyra through a side passage while plasma bolts shattered ancient walls behind them. His body remembered war, even when his heart was tired of it. Duck, turn, fire once, keep moving. Lyra followed, breath quick, silver light flickering across her fingers. At the end of the passage, they found a bridge stretched over a bottomless shaft, its surface made of translucent energy. Halfway across, the bridge vanished. Ethan caught Lyra's wrist before she fell. For one terrifying second, she hung over darkness, her long hair spilling downward like a banner in the wind. "Don't let go," she breathed. Ethan grunted, boots sliding. "That was not in my retirement plan. You still think about gold?" "Constantly. It comforts me." She laughed despite the fear, and the sound steadied them both. Her glowing hand rose, and the bridge rebuilt itself under their feet. Not from machinery, but from light answering her will. They ran into a hidden archive chamber as the door sealed behind them. On the far wall, a final hologram appeared, an Aurelian woman wearing a crown of stars. She looked directly at Lyra and said, "Daughter of the last dawn, trust not the council. They preserved you because they fear what only you can open." Ethan stared at the message, then at Lyra. "So the people who gave you to me as a reward may be villains." Lyra swallowed. "And you are still staying?" Ethan checked the rifle's weak charge and sighed. "I've had worse assignments." A blast struck the sealed door. Dust rained from the ceiling. Lyra looked at him with something fragile and uncertain in her eyes. Ethan stood beside her, facing the shaking door. "Besides," he added, "someone has to make sure haunted ruins don't keep flirting with your blood." The sealed archive door trembled under another blast, and dust fell from the ceiling in pale curtains. Ethan stood with one shoulder against the wall, rifle raised, while Lyra stared at the fading image of the Aurelian queen. The words still hung in the air like frost. "Trust not the council." Outside, soldiers shouted in a language the translator refused to process, claiming the dialect was aggressively unpleasant. Ethan glanced at his wrist device. "Even my equipment is judging them." Lyra did not laugh this time. Her silver eyes were fixed on the ancient star map blooming above the pedestal. Lines of light connected dead systems, forgotten colonies, and a vast darkness beyond known space. At its center pulsed a symbol shaped like an open eye. "The Astral Gate," she whispered. "It is real." Ethan stepped closer. "And naturally, everyone wants you to open it, because the galaxy has never met a dangerous glowing circle it didn't try to abuse." The map shifted, revealing council signatures hidden inside old preservation files. Names, seals, orders. The same leaders who had placed Lyra under Ethan's guardianship had known about her bloodline for decades. They had not protected her out of mercy. They had kept her alive as a key. Lyra's hands shook, faint threads of silver energy crawling along her fingers. "My life was never mine." Ethan lowered his voice. "Then we steal it back." The next blast cracked the door open. Black-armored soldiers poured in, but Lyra turned before Ethan could fire. The air folded around her like transparent glass. Every attacker froze, suspended an inch above the floor, their weapons locked in mid-aim. Ethan stared. "You know, for someone who keeps saying she cannot do things safely, you are becoming very rude to physics." Lyra swayed, and he caught her by the arm. Her skin was cold. "It is getting stronger," she said. "Or I am getting weaker." A hidden passage opened behind the pedestal, as if the ruin itself had chosen to answer. They fled into a tunnel where the walls lit at Lyra's passing, showing scenes of Aurelians launching silver ships into a storm of stars. At the end, a chamber waited beneath the planet's surface, vast and silent, filled with thousands of stasis pods. Most were dark, empty, dead. Only one small console still glowed. When Lyra touched it, a final record awakened. Her people had not built the Astral Gate to conquer space, but to prevent any empire from controlling travel between worlds. The gate could free isolated civilizations, erase military blockades, and make conquest nearly impossible. In the wrong hands, it could also trap entire planets forever. Ethan understood then why warlords, councils, and saints with expensive robes would all kill for it. Power that could free everyone terrified those who profited from cages. Lyra looked at him, her face pale beneath the silver light. "If I open it, I may start another war." "War already started," Ethan said. "You just weren't invited to the planning meeting." She let out a strained laugh. "You make every disaster sound like bad administration." "Most disasters are." A signal suddenly pierced the chamber. A hologram appeared above them. High Chancellor Varric, his 4 silver hands folded in false sorrow. "Commander Carter, you have been misled. Return the Aurelian, and your reward will be restored. Gold, land, rank, anything you desire." Ethan looked at Lyra, then at the Chancellor. "Anything?" Varric leaned closer. "Name it." Ethan nodded thoughtfully. "I want a ship that doesn't insult me, a retirement moon with fried potatoes, and for you to stop calling people rewards." Lyra covered her mouth, but a laugh escaped anyway. Varric's face hardened. "You choose treason for her?" Ethan stepped in front of Lyra, the old war fire returning to his eyes. "No, I choose her freedom over your receipt." The hologram vanished. Above the buried chamber, engines thundered as more ships entered orbit. Lyra stood beside Ethan, no longer behind him. The stasis chamber lights reflected in her silver eyes, like waking stars. "Then we go to the Astral Gate," she said. Ethan checked his nearly empty rifle and sighed. "Of course we do. I was afraid this day might become sensible. And I wanted dates. You're a boy." The underground chamber began to tremble as the first bombardment struck the surface. Ancient stone groaned, dust drifted through shafts of silver light, and somewhere above, warships exchanged fire across the skies of Ver 9. Ethan looked at the trembling ceiling, then at his rifle, which politely informed him it had only 8 plasma shots remaining. 8, he muttered. The rifle's tiny display blinked. "Correction, 7. Thank you for checking." Lyra raised an eyebrow. "Do your weapons always mock you?" "Only the expensive ones." The ancient archives suddenly came alive. Thousands of dormant consoles illuminated simultaneously, projecting streams of Aurelian symbols into the air. One by one, they merged into a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy. Instead of showing political borders, however, it displayed countless hidden passages between stars, routes no modern civilization knew existed. "The astral paths," Lyra whispered. "What are they?" "The safe roads." She slowly walked around the floating map, her long ears catching the pale light. "When my people built the Astral Gate, they also created invisible corridors through hyperspace. Trade, diplomacy, rescue missions. Civilizations could reach one another without crossing dangerous regions. And if someone controlled those roads, they could isolate entire galaxies." Ethan folded his arms. "So the Council isn't after a superweapon. No, they're after traffic control." Lyra looked confused. He smiled. "You'd be amazed how dangerous people become when they can decide who gets stuck in traffic." For a brief moment she laughed, and hearing it somehow made the ancient chamber feel less empty. The laughter ended when another hologram suddenly activated. Unlike the recordings before, this one wasn't ancient, it was live. A hooded man appeared above the central platform, his face hidden behind a black metallic mask. His voice was calm. "Commander Carter, this is Dar D. Ethan instantly aimed his rifle. "Sorry," he said. "Appointments are full today. You have become inconvenient. I hear that a lot. You survived every attempt because she has awakened faster than predicted." Lyra stiffened. "You know who I am," she said. "I know what you are." The masked figure ignored Ethan completely. "You were never meant to live freely. You were engineered to activate the gate when the galaxy became weak enough to control." Ethan stepped directly between Lyra and the projection. She heard enough speeches from politicians. The masked man finally looked toward Ethan. "You're wasting your life protecting her. I've wasted it on worse jobs. Name your price." Ethan sighed dramatically. "You people really don't listen." The hologram remained silent. "I already told your boss I wanted gold. We can give you planets. I barely know how to take care of houseplants. We can give you command of a fleet. I just escaped military paperwork. We can make you one of the richest humans alive." Ethan scratched his chin. That one almost sounded interesting. Lyra slowly turned toward him. He waited just long enough before grinning. "But then I'd have to spend it with people like you." The transmission vanished instantly. For several seconds, only silence remained. Then the AI from their damaged transport interrupted through Ethan's communicator. "I intercepted the conversation. You're alive? Emotionally uncertain, mechanically optimistic. I'll take it. I have located transportation. You found another ship?" "Yes." "Is it better than the last one?" "No." Ethan closed his eyes. "How much worse?" "It is technically older than your species." Lyra couldn't stop herself from laughing. "I believe," she said between quiet laughs, "your luck may actually be cursed. My luck retired years ago." Guided by the AI, they climbed through hidden maintenance tunnels until they reached an enormous underground hangar. There, resting beneath centuries of dust, stood a breathtaking silver spacecraft, unlike anything built by the Alliance. Its smooth hull reflected the chamber lights like liquid metal. Ancient Aurelian symbols glowed softly across its surface. As Lyra stepped closer, the ship awakened. Thousands of blue lights flowed across its hull, the entrance ramp lowered by itself. A gentle feminine voice echoed through the hangar. Genetic signature confirmed. It paused, then added warmly, "Welcome home, Princess Lyra." Lyra froze. "I've never seen this ship." "You don't remember," the ship answered gently. "You left aboard this vessel when you were an infant." Ethan looked from Lyra to the magnificent cruiser, then back to his communicator. "So let me understand." "Yes?" asked the AI. "My replacement ship belongs to an extinct civilization." "Yes." "Recognizes my travel companion as royalty." "Yes." "And probably doesn't leak engine oil." The elegant ship answered before anyone else could. "I do not leak." Ethan smiled. "I already like this one better." Before either of them could board, every warning light inside the hangar suddenly flashed crimson. The ancient ship spoke again. "Emergency alert." Its calm voice became cold. "Hostile fleet entering planetary orbit." A new hologram appeared above the vessel. Not one, not 10. More than 300 enemy warships surrounded Ver 9. At the center of the formation drifted a colossal black flagship, nearly the size of a small moon. Ethan stared upward. "Well," Lyra looked at him, "this feels expensive." He nodded, slowly. "Finally." Then he looked at the enormous enemy fleet. "Now I understand why they couldn't afford to pay me in gold." The Aurelian ship rose from the buried hangar like a silver ghost waking beneath the bones of a dead world. Sand and ancient dust poured from its hull as the engines ignited without flame, bending gravity into soft blue rings. Ethan gripped the command rail while the floor shifted beneath his boots, trying very hard not to look impressed. "All right," he said. "This is definitely better than the flying kettle." The ship's voice replied. "Comparison accepted, though mildly insulting." Lyra stood before the central console, her palms hovering over streams of liquid light. The vessel responded to her without buttons, without commands, as if it had been waiting centuries simply to breathe with her again. Her long ears trembled faintly when the first enemy barrage struck the upper atmosphere. Above them, 300 warships tightened formation around the planet, and the moon-sized flagship opened its dark hangar bays like a mouthful of knives. "Can this ship fight?" Ethan asked. "Yes," the vessel answered. "Can it win?" "Define win." Ethan sighed. "I miss when machines lied to comfort me." Lyra turned, silver eyes bright with fear and power. "The Astral Gate lies beyond that fleet. If we cannot pass, they will take me." Ethan checked the weapons locker and found elegant crystal rifles arranged like museum pieces. He grabbed one, and it immediately reshaped itself to fit his hands. "Oh, now that is service." The ship launched from the collapsing ruins as enemy fire rained down. It did not fly like Alliance vessels. It slipped between blasts, folded sideways through space, and vanished for half seconds at a time, leaving only after images for missiles to chase. Ethan stumbled into a wall. "I respect the technology, but my stomach has filed a formal protest." Lyra almost laughed, but then the flagship projected a signal across every channel. The masked man appeared, seated on a throne of black metal. "Princess Lyra, cease resistance." "Commander Carter, this is your final offer. Surrender her, and the human worlds will be spared." Ethan leaned toward the console. "Counter-offer. You surrender, apologize, and send gold." Lyra whispered. "Gold again? Consistency builds character." The masked man removed his helmet. Beneath it was Chancellor Varric, his silver face cold and exhausted. "The galaxy cannot be trusted with freedom," he said. "The gate must belong to those wise enough to control it." Ethan's smile vanished. Funny how everyone who says that includes himself in the wise group. Varric's fleet opened fire. The Aurelian ship dove into the storm. Lyra spread her fingers across the console, and silver energy surged from her veins into the vessel. The stars ahead distorted, revealing a hidden corridor through hyperspace, narrow as a needle and glowing with ancient symbols. "I can open a path," she said, voice strained, "but not while they are firing." Ethan looked at the tactical display, then at the enemy boarding craft closing behind them. "Then I'll make them look at me." Before Lyra could stop him, he ran to the rear launch bay and climbed into a small fighter older than most human myths. The cockpit sealed around him. "This thing have weapons?" he asked. The fighter answered, "Two." "Only two guns?" "Two moods." "I regret asking." He launched into open space. The fighter screamed past Lyra's ship, drawing enemy targeting systems toward him. Plasma fire filled the void, bright and merciless. Ethan flew like a man who had survived every battlefield by refusing to behave sensibly. He skimmed over destroyers, cut beneath missile trails, and tricked two enemy cruisers into firing on each other. That was not my fault, he told the cockpit after one exploded. Mostly. Behind him, Lyra's ship reached the hidden corridor. She watched Ethan's tiny fighter vanish and reappear among impossible fire, and something inside her broke free from fear. "Ethan," she whispered through the channel, "return now. Busy being heroic. It is very inconvenient. You cannot hold them alone." "I know. That is why I am making it look dramatic." A missile struck his wing. Alarms screamed. His fighter spun toward the flagship. Lyra cried out, and silver light erupted from her body, flooding the Aurelian ship until every symbol on its hull burned like a newborn star. The astral path opened. Space split into a shining tunnel. Ethan regained control at the last moment and laughed breathlessly. "Good news. Still alive. Bad news. My fighter hates me." Lyra's ship swept past and caught him in a gravity field, dragging the damaged fighter into the corridor. Behind them, Varric's fleet tried to follow, but the path collapsed like a closing eye. For one silent moment, they drifted beyond normal space, surrounded by rivers of light older than civilization. Ethan climbed from the smoking fighter, limping, smiling, covered in sparks. Lyra ran to him and stopped inches away, as if afraid to admit how frightened she had been. He raised a hand. "Before you scold me, remember I saved us and looked extremely professional." She stared at him. "Your left boot is on fire." Ethan looked down. "Professionally on fire." Lyra laughed then, shaking and relieved. While ahead of them, the Astral Gate appeared, an enormous ring of living starlight turning slowly in the dark, waiting for its princess and the foolish human who had refused to sell her. The Astral Gate filled the void like a crown forged from living stars, its immense ring turning without sound beyond the laws of any known engine. Lyra stepped from the Aurelian ship onto a bridge of silver light that formed beneath her feet, while Ethan followed with one smoking boot, a scorched sleeve, and the expression of a man who had finally accepted that retirement was avoiding him on purpose. "For the record," he said, staring at the cosmic machine, "this is a little bigger than the reward hall." Lyra looked back, fear and wonder shining together in her silver eyes. "This is where my people ended. Then we make sure it is also where their mistake ends." At the center of the gate, ancient voices awakened, not as ghosts, but as stored minds woven into quantum memory. They showed Lyra the truth. Her bloodline had not been created to rule the gate, but to deny ownership of it forever. The final Aurelian command required her to choose between control and release. Before she could answer, space tore open behind them. Varric's damaged flagship forced its way through the collapsing path, bleeding fire from its hull. His voice thundered across the gate. "Open it for the Council, or I will burn every world that sheltered you." Ethan stepped forward, though his rifle was empty. "You people really love dramatic entrances." Varric laughed coldly. "You have no army." Ethan glanced at Lyra. "True, but I have a princess, a ship with opinions, and a boot that survived more combat than most generals." The Aurelian ship responded through the channel. "The boot is statistically impressive." Lyra laughed once, softly, and the sound steadied her. Varric launched boarding drones toward the bridge, black machines cutting through starlight like insects. Ethan charged to meet them with a broken crystal rifle used more like a club than a weapon, buying seconds with stubborn human fury. Lyra reached the gate's core and placed both hands into the light. Power flooded her veins. Every astral path in the galaxy appeared before her. Worlds under blockade, colonies forgotten by politics, refugee moons waiting behind military borders. She understood then that freedom was not a gift given by councils. It was a door that had to stay open. Varric reached the bridge, wounded but still armed. He aimed at Ethan. "Last chance, human. Gold, rank, a fleet. Walk away." Ethan looked at the man he had once admired, then at Lyra, glowing like the last dawn of her people. The soldier who had wanted only payment was gone. In his place stood a man who had learned that some treasures could not be stored, spent, or weighed. "Keep it," he said. "I found something more expensive." Lyra smiled through the light and spoke the final Aurelian command. The gate erupted, not as a weapon, but as a promise. Across the galaxy, hidden roads opened to peaceful worlds, while locking themselves against war fleets, tyrants, and any council signature tied to conquest. Varric's flagship lost power instantly. His drones dropped harmlessly into the void like embarrassed furniture. The Black Fleet outside Ver9 surrendered when their navigation systems politely informed them they were morally unqualified for travel. Ethan leaned on the broken rifle, panting, "I like this gate." Days later, in the rebuilt Victory Hall, Varric and his conspirators stood exposed by Aurelian records. The council was dissolved and reformed under the witness of hundreds of worlds newly connected by the open paths. Lyra refused a throne built from fear, choosing instead to become guardian of the gate's freedom. Ethan was finally offered gold, mountains of it, projected in glorious holographic detail. He stared at it for a long, painful moment. "I want it noted," he said, "that refusing this hurts me spiritually." Lyra's long ears tilted with amusement. "You may still have your moon. With fried potatoes? With terrible soup if you miss the army." Ethan shuddered. "Never joke about that." The hall laughed, not at him, but with him. For the first time, Ethan did not feel like a weapon waiting for orders, and Lyra did not feel like a key waiting to be used. They left the ceremony together, aboard the silver ship, not as guardian and reward, but as companions, choosing the stars on their own terms. Behind them, the astral paths shimmered open across the galaxy, and ahead waited a quiet moon, a small tavern, and a future no law had written for them.